Geezer Butler is a name that doesn't shout for attention and doesn't want to be in the spotlight. But would Black Sabbath have ever become the defining force that gave birth to heavy metal? They created an album in just 3 days that had a sound that was dense and heavy with evil, and lyrics that seemed like prophetic visions of war, death, and injustice, which were issues that rock music at the moment didn't want to touch. Butler, on the other hand, laid them bare, uncooked, and without fear. Butler was more than simply the bassist, he was born among the wreckage of World War II. He was the brain and heart of Black Sabbath. His dark tunes and eerie lyrics helped define the heavy metal genre. More than 70 million albums sold. A huge amount, but Butler left behind more than just records. He left behind something. But Black Sabbath's story was never easy, even with all the glory. Tensions that went unspoken, sudden departures, and legal fights that lasted for decades. At one point, Black Sabbath was like a family, but in the end, they broke apart. Butler didn't speak up very frequently, but every time he left, the band changed for the worse. So, was Geezer Butler a quiet genius or an unstoppable force? Was he the heart and soul of Black Sabbath or merely a part of a once great band? Let's take a look at Geezer Butler's stormy journey, where wins and losses have always gone hand in hand. Life in the beginning. Geezer Butler was born on July 17, 1949, in Aston, Birmingham, a grey-stained, industrial area where the war had ended but the scars were still visible on every wall. His family came from Irish working-class backgrounds and had a hard time making ends meet on low pay. James Butler, his father, had been in the Royal Scots Regiment before becoming a technical labourer. Mary Butler, his mother, had worked as a nanny but spent her whole life raising their 7 children. The house Butler grew up in didn't have hot water or a phone. In the winter, it was so chilly that the whole family would cluster together on an old, worn-out bed to stay warm. There were days when all they had to eat was dry bread and tea. There was no luxury and no encouragement for music, but Butler found another way to escape: books. He lost himself in the realms of Shakespeare, Homer, and science fiction. He knew from a young age that the world was more than simply famine, conflict, and the hard lives of the working class. It was also something far bigger, darker, and strangely beautiful. He once claimed, "I never went a day without reading something," and later, the extremely philosophical and contemplative lyrics in Black Sabbath's music would show how those years shaped him. But Butler's childhood wasn't always as calm as the pages of a book. His family was quite religious and went to church every week. But as he got older, he started to doubt religion more and more. He didn't go to church to pray. He went to look at the females in their Sunday best. He went to church for the last time when a nun made fun of his long hair and called him a little girl. He didn't choose the name Geezer. His older brother, who had served in the military with Cockney soldiers from London, gave it to him. When he got back home, he always called people Geezer, which is a slang word for dude or mate. Young Butler started doing it, and soon his pals had given him the nickname that would stick with him for life. Geezer Butler was born at that point. Butler's parents didn't teach him music, but it came naturally to him. His dad didn't think it was a real job. Butler didn't care that his mother only wanted him to have a steady job. He didn't want other people to decide what would happen to him in the future. And then, in one moment, everything changed for him. The Beatles came to Birmingham in 1963. That night, in the middle of the thousands of shouting fans, there was a teenage Butler. He was amazed by how ordinary individuals like John Lennon and Paul McCartney could dominate the stage and make the world go crazy. But Butler wasn't the only person there that night. There was another youngster standing there, just as spellbound. Butler had never met this strange person with wild, uncontrolled eyes before. He was called John Ozzy Osbourne. They couldn't have known that just a few years later they would be standing next to each other writing the best chapter in heavy metal history. Geezer Butler didn't start off as a bass player. He began as a rhythm guitarist and was very interested in the music of the Beatles, the Kinks, Cream, and Jimi Hendrix. But the path to heavy metal was far from easy. It started with a painful setback. Butler and Ozzy Osbourne started the Rare Breed in 1967. It was a new name and a new chance for them to show what they could do, but the band broke up almost right away. A dream that was only starting to take shape was already broken. But Butler didn't stop trying. He took advantage of the next chance that came his way. He and Ozzy got back together with Tony Iommi and Bill Ward to form the Polkatult Blues Band. But this wasn't your typical blues band. Their music was harder and darker, and it had a different kind of energy. They changed their name to Earth, but it still wasn't strong enough. Butler came up with the name Black Sabbath in 1969. Based on the Scary Movie with Boris Karloff. A moniker that made people think of darkness, mystery, and danger, which was exactly what the band was becoming. But to become Black Sabbath, they had to give something up. Tony Iommi didn't want the band to have two guitars. Butler had to move to bass, something he had never played before. He had never played before and didn't have his own instrument. He got a 3-string bass from a friend and started learning right away. Butler quickly learned how to play the bass and made it one of Black Sabbath's most important weapons. His deep, dark lines mixed with Iommi's piercing riffs to make a sound that had never been heard before. A year later, Black Sabbath was founded, and rock music would never be the same again. Success in your career. A huge change shook up the music industry in 1970. Black Sabbath's first record came out, and it featured a heavy, dark, and haunting sound that had never been heard before. But it wasn't simply Tony Iommi's sharp riffs or Ozzy Osbourne's creepy singing that made them famous. There was someone behind it all who was quietly developing the band's essence. The bass lines were like the heartbeat of hell, and the lyrics were like the turmoil of the world. That person was Geezer Butler. No one can deny that the 1970 album Paranoid made Black Sabbath famous. Iron Man became one of heavy metal's all-time great songs, War Pigs was a scary anti-war song, and Paranoid, a song that the band wrote in under 3 hours to complete out an album, became their biggest hit. But Butler penned the narrative that go along with these songs, changing Black Sabbath from a regular rock band into a force to be reckoned with. His lyrics weren't simply rebellious, they were creepy thoughts on war, religion, the decline of society, and the fears that people try to hide. Not everyone was ready to accept them, though. In the US, Black Sabbath was called devil's music and put on a blacklist because of their dark look and lyrics that talked about religion. Butler said over and over that Black Sabbath never praised black magic. If anything, they were telling people how dangerous it was. But many people still thought they were messengers of Satan because of their name, Black Sabbath, and songs like After Forever and Black Sabbath. No matter what others called them, they became legendary. The albums that came after made them even more powerful. Master of Reality came out in 1971. Butler and Iommi changed heavy music forever when they tuned their instruments down to C-sharp. This made a deeper, heavier sound that subsequently established the basis for doom metal. Volume 4, released in 1972, was a high point for creativity, as the band tried out new song forms and textures. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which came out in 1973, took their sound even farther, mixing their dark sound with complicated harmonies. But Butler wasn't just a bass player. He changed the way people thought about playing bass in heavy metal. He didn't just add a background beat, he made the bass an important part of the main melody. He was one of the first bassists to employ a wah-wah pedal, which gave the band's sound more depth and range. He was also the first to use detuning, which means lowering the bottom strings to get the deep, crushing sound that made Sabbath famous. The most essential thing was that he and Iommi created a unique synergy between the bass and guitar. They no longer played individually, instead, they worked together to create a suffocating dread effect that drew listeners into a realm of chaos, misery, and spooky beauty. Bill Ward came to Butler's residence in 1977 and told him that the band had chosen to terminate him. No talking, no explaining, just a cold choice. But Ward phoned him back just a few weeks later and asked him to come back. Butler asked Iommi and Osbourne about the choice, and both denied it. He came back, but a part of his trust had already been damaged. Butler left for a short time 2 years later when Ozzy was sacked to deal with his failing marriage. Black Sabbath continued on with Ronnie James Dio and recorded Heaven and Hell in 1980, first with bassist Craig Gruber. But before the album came out, Butler came back and re-recorded all the bass parts. This showed that Black Sabbath still needed him, whether they liked it or not. There were a lot of people leaving and coming back in the next few years. Butler departed in 1984, came back, and then left again in 1994. He could never entirely break away from Black Sabbath, no matter what. He worked with Osbourne on Osmosis in 1995, then started his own band, G/Z/R, and released Plastic Planet, but fate kept bringing him back. He rejoined Black Sabbath in 1997 at OS Fest and stayed with the band as the bassist until they broke up. In January 2016, Black Sabbath began their farewell tour, which ended in February 2017. It was the end of a chapter that lasted almost 50 years. But before that, in 2013, Butler, Iommi, and Osbourne put out 13, the band's last album. This time, writing songs wasn't as easy as it used to be. The bad memories of childhood, war, and religion were gone. Butler's life has gotten less busy. Still, 13 was a huge hit, sending Black Sabbath back to the top one last time before they broke up for good. In 2023, he published his memoir, Into the Void, which tells the story of his life from infancy to Black Sabbath and beyond, including the good and bad times. The book rapidly got a lot of attention, bringing him back into the public eye after years of being quiet. Then, in June 2024, he showed up to a Foo Fighters concert in Birmingham out of the blue. A little moment, but it reminds me that Geezer Butler is still around. A classic heavy metal figure. No one can argue that Butler was more than just Black Sabbath's bassist when you look back. He was its absolute essence. Would Black Sabbath have been the famous band they are now without Butler? Could heavy metal have survived without his dark, brooding bass lines? There are no numbers, albums, or tours that show the answer. It's because every time a young bassist plays, they can hear Butler's voice in every dark, loud note of heavy metal. Life at home. Geezer Butler once stated, "Music is a part of me, but family is everything." But it cost a lot to find a balance between these two worlds. One of heavy metal's biggest stars had a lot of ups and downs in his life, including marriages, difficult relationships, and fights that lasted for decades. Butler met Georgina while he was a youngster at a dance at Hulta Grammar School in Birmingham. That first love wasn't just a teenage crush, it became his emotional anchor during the difficult years when he was trying to prove himself. Georgina was there when Black Sabbath was still a new band and Butler was just a poor young man trying to make it in music. But stardom came too quickly, and it cost a lot. The constant touring stress of rock and roll life made them feel like they were far apart. Butler tried to keep the marriage together, but they got divorced in 1980. He knew that he couldn't salvage his marriage and that the past was over for good. Butler had another important meeting on September 16, 1978, 2 years before his first marriage dissolved. He met Gloria at Checkerdome in St. Louis, just before a Black Sabbath show. She would go on to be not only his wife, but also his manager, advisor, and most important business partner. Georgina was the carefree days of youth, while Gloria was the one who helped Butler find peace during the rough years of his life. They were married, had kids, and went through the good and bad times together, both on and off stage. The Butler family had 2 boys, and each of them chose a different path. The oldest, Biff Butler, grew up in a Catholic environment and became the lead vocalist of the band Apartment 26. The youngest, James Butler, on the other hand, went an entirely opposite way. He moved to London after getting his degree in social sciences from Oxford University and became very left-wing. Butler once thought about how he grew up poor and found comfort in religion, but his youngest son grew up rich and privileged and saw the world in a very different way. Butler's family was still the most important thing to him, even though they didn't always agree on everything. He once observed that each age perceives the world in its own way, and I appreciate that. Butler's compassion never changed, though. Butler was a staunch vegetarian from an early age. He previously had a dog named Scamp that he liked very much. He said that Scamp was a greater companion than anyone else. His love for animals didn't change as he got older. There were always pets in the Butler house, mainly cats, which he often posted about on social media. In the 1990s, he became a vegan, not merely for health reasons, but also because he really believed that people shouldn't hurt animals. He was in a PETA campaign in 2009 to speak out against animal cruelty, especially the foie gras trade. He once said, "I've seen a lot of crazy things in my life, but it's horrible to see these poor birds suffer just so their sick livers can be sold in stores." But no matter how hard Butler tried to find calm, his environment was never really silent. Georgina was not Gloria Butler. She was more than simply a wife, she was also a strategist who helped him run his career and made important decisions for him. But this accidentally got Butler into a fight he didn't want to have, a frontal fight with Sharon Osbourne, the lady who ran Ozzy Osbourne's whole career. Sharon and Gloria. Two strong people with two different plans. Butler and Ozzy's long-standing friendship started to fall apart when they couldn't get along. The talk stopped, and there was only silence for years. Butler said that he and Ozzy never had any problems with each other, but when their spouses couldn't get along, the two old friends naturally drifted apart. But there were other problems with Black Sabbath as well. By the end of the 1970s, the band was in a drug, drink, and internal conflict spiral. Ozzy Osbourne was getting more and more out of control, which had a direct effect on recording sessions and live shows. Tony Iommi, who was the band's unofficial leader, couldn't take it anymore and had to fire Ozzy in 1979. Butler didn't make the choice, but he agreed with it. Soon after that, he also quit the band for a while to deal with his failing marriage. Ozzy Osbourne sued Tony Iommi in 2009 to get back the rights to the Black Sabbath name. Even though he wasn't personally involved, he was pulled into the lawsuit since he had sold his share to Iommi but still kept a quarter of the band's revenues. They got back together and recorded 13 in 2013, but the problems from the past never really went away. Butler was usually quiet, but he never let anyone offend his loved ones. Someone insulted Gloria in a club in California in 2015. Butler didn't think twice. He knocked the man out with one punch and was arrested for assault and being drunk in public. He spent the night in jail and then paid a fine to get out. He didn't talk about the event very much, but others who knew him understood. He wasn't a violent person unless someone hurt his family. Butler has found a way to blend his stardom with his personal life after everything. He chose peace after years of fighting, suing, and losing. He wanted to live with his wife, boys, and cats, and his love of music would last forever. A place where he could be himself without having to fight the battles of the past again. Present life and legacy, Geezer Butler no longer seeks the spotlight. No longer hides away on extended excursions or in long, tiring arguments. He has chosen a different, gentler, and more serene rhythm with Gloria in Los Angeles. But don't think that his retreat means he's completely gone. Butler has never been the type to let go easily. His love for animals, football, and music are still very important to him. Since the 1990s, he has been a staunch vegetarian. In 2009, he became a spokesperson for PETA and has since been very vocal about animal rights. He didn't just choose to stop eating meat, it was a way of life for him. But one thing that surprises a lot of people is that Butler seldom ever swears. This seems almost impossible in an industry where swearing is second nature. He once said that when he was a kid, the first and only time he swore in front of his dad, he got hit so hard that he never did it again. Butler loves football as much as he loves music. He loves Aston Villa and goes to games with Tony Iommi a lot. When Black Sabbath was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2006, Butler didn't give a speech like the others. Instead, he grabbed the mic and shouted, "Next Villa." A little phrase, but it's all Butler. He doesn't pretend or be formal, he just lives by what he likes. Even though he is no longer on stage, music is still a big part of his life. Into the Void, his memoir, came out in 2023. It tells the story of how he went from being a poor youngster in Aston to a heavy metal icon. There was more to the book than merely a personal experience. It was a thank you to the fans who had been with him through good times and bad for decades. He doesn't play as much as he used to, but he still understands how to get a crowd going. He showed up unexpectedly during a Foo Fighters event in Birmingham in June 2024. A surprise reappearance that reminds us that Geezer Butler is still around and still a part of the rock world. Is this the last part? Not likely. Butler may have left the stage, but his legacy will live on. Looking back on everything he has done, maybe he has finally found what he has always wanted, a calm existence, a career that lasts forever, and a family that stays with him. Geezer Butler wasn't simply the bassist for Black Sabbath, he also came up with the band's most famous lyrics. He didn't merely play music, he helped shape a whole genre. Tony Iommi built the groundwork with his heavy riffs, but Butler gave Black Sabbath its heart and soul, turning those noises into an eerie, all-encompassing sensation. His lyrics were more than just words. They were thoughts about war, religion, people's concerns, and an uncertain future. Black Sabbath's 1970 album, Paranoid, and Master of Reality's 1971 album, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, all did well. They were the building blocks of heavy metal. Paranoid, a song that took only 3 hours to write, is now one of the best rock songs ever. But Butler's impact went beyond just writing songs. He changed the way people play bass guitar in heavy metal. He was one of the first bassists to employ a wah-wah pedal, which made sounds that eventually became quite popular in doom metal and stoner rock. He was also one of the first people to use detuning, lowering his bass strings to C-sharp, which made the dark, deep sound that would become metal's distinctive sound. His brave new ideas inspired many artists, including Alice in Chains, Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Pantera. Butler's legacy isn't only about numbers. Even by those measures, his accomplishments are amazing. More than 70 million Black Sabbath albums have been sold, and several of them have gone platinum or gold. In 2006, Butler and the band were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in 2005, they were admitted into the UK Music Hall of Fame. This made them everlasting legends of rock. But maybe his most important legacy isn't in numbers or prizes. It's because of how he revolutionized how people think about music. Butler changed the history of heavy metal when he came onto the stage as a poor youngster from the smoky slums of Aston. He was never loud or rude, and he never wanted short-lived celebrity. But what he left behind doesn't need big speeches. A bass line repeats. A lyric sticks in the listener's head. And they know that is Geezer Butler. Geezer Butler is more than just a great bassist. He is the quiet heart of both Black Sabbath and heavy metal music. From growing up in an impoverished family in Aston to performing on stages all around the world, he has made an imprint that will never go away. You can't just look at an artist's technical skills or album sales to see how amazing they are. You also have to look at the influence they leave behind. Black Sabbath would have still been around without Butler, but it would never have had the depth, darkness, and defiant philosophy that we know today. He doesn't go on sold-out tours or spend sleepless nights in the studio anymore. He doesn't stand in the spotlight anymore. But his music lives on. In every song, every word, and in the hearts of millions of fans. He has had a huge impact on many artists throughout the years, including Metallica, Iron Maiden, Pantera, and Alice in Chains. Butler never wanted to be famous for a short time, yet his legacy is tough to forget. A bass line thumps, a song sticks in the listener's head, and they know it's Geezer Butler. But there is still one question that needs to be answered. Will we ever see him on stage again? Is it possible for Black Sabbath to get back together with its famous lineup, or is that chapter over for good? People who like the show are still waiting for an answer. Thanks for watching the whole video. If you like hearing stories about rock stars that haven't been told before, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. There is more to come.